Chick. 1, 2.
Still working, still waking up looking for real purpose. Still trying to figure out what it's gonna take. Still trying to find connection with some real surface level types. Back when I was young, I used to pedal bikes. Now I'm riding cross country, doing several nights in and out the Sprinter van. Pull up, get the levels right, get a bite to eat, do the show, and then we settle like what could be a better life. But I'm still staring at the ceiling in my bed at night. Think about what I don't got yet, why I'm not high yet, why the last project was something that I thought would make me something that I'm not yet. It's all a work in progress, that's what they tell me, and I respond with I guess. I've been wanting to get something off my chest, but it's not time yet, it might never be time. My kid won't get no screen time, at least it's what I'd like to think. Cause my childhood was filled with tree climbs and oatmeal cream pies and looking at the street signs. I guess that he gon' be fine, or she will. I just feel like it's hard to be thrilled in times like this, when our hands can't keep still. And if it's not Insta, then it's emails. It's beauty in the details, so I'ma try my best to pay attention to them. Spend your day with this and it can get you through it. I ain't seen an institute since I ended schooling. Used to hate it, now my dreams take place in it. Sunshine through the blinds till I wake in it. I just got done stretching like the 8th inning. Now it's time to get something for the day's finish. I got well wishes in my cell phone from my classmates that let themselves go. Well aware that I'm well known. Know we had a stretch of time between us that you felt close to me, but it's been a minute since. Did I change it? Did they rob me of my innocence? Inner city kids I grew up with, we had some differences, but inside gymnasiums it's almost like they didn't exist. Time's ticking, my mom's 50. Told me that she been thinking about spending time different. It's more precious. What if I took the same method at 21 and adopted it? Sometimes I feel like I'm tripping for dipping out of town with my pops living still. Palms itching, but this money has not been a drill. Ain't no pattern to the way I tend to feel. It's all over the place. I'ma lower the shades and sleep in. I ran into a kid I grew up with. He shook my hand and told me, no one thought you'd do this. I can't relate, but see, I understand. Cause when they hear me now compared to back then, it's like, who is this? Don't know if I changed, but the music did. In my old shit, I used to just admit things. Now I sit around and wonder, is that something you admit? Cause when I hear it, all I do is cringe. I guess I did change. 2 years in ATL. Before I moved, I had never got drunk. Now I'm getting towed up like a ACL. Meeting people that my friends idolize, that they only ever get a chance to see on ATL. Artists that they playing through a JBL. In somebody's basement, smoking, getting wasted. Something in the air and I could taste it. 2018, I couldn't be on my own. Every night I call a girl and fall asleep on the phone. I guess it was how I cope with leaving from home. Discipline, I gotta keep it controlled. It gets more difficult to rap every day, cause it's less and less things that feel like words saying. Nothing is for sure except life sure ends. I tried to keep that in mind, but it's not working.
Y'all are doing well. Welcome to UX class. We're going to get started here in just a sec. As you can see, today we're going to be talking about end-user programming and fonts. Okay, so as we talked about before, we are going to be learning about a lot of details that help you make your user experience full, right? Details like fonts, details like when you get end users to configure your system, what does that look like? But before we get started for today, I'm going to go ahead and hit up just a few announcements. First of all, you have a project due Friday. Remember, that project is to fix things that we talked about last week when we reviewed everybody's projects. So fix things, and to that end, you're going to have 4 before-after pictures to submit, and I'm going to be a little bit strict on the format of these things. So you're going to need to have a before picture on the left, a after picture on the right. It's going to be one picture, and it's going to be a PNG, and it's going to be before, before like your last version basically, and then your new version and what you changed. So you're going to have 4 pictures of that. If they're not PNG, I will not accept them. If they're not including both screenshots in one, I will not accept them. So make sure you pay attention to format this time. Again, before, after, PNG, one file, and there's 4 of them. Another thing that you should keep in mind is, no JPG, only PNG. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is we're going to update fonts this week. So we're going to talk a little bit about fonts today, and you're going to need to make sure you have at least been intentional about choosing your fonts, and you're going to have to discuss why you should choose your fonts, why you chose those fonts. So that's going to be something that you're going to want to pay attention to this week and have done for this Friday. This is already all up on Gradescope, so if you have any questions about it, go look on Gradescope. And just let me know if you have any further questions, especially at the end of class. We can talk about it more. Also, make sure you check your grades occasionally in Canvas. They're usually up to date. They are up to date now, I believe. Some people have not checked them. I can tell because there's a couple questions that I would personally have as a student. So just make sure you check those occasionally and hit me up with any questions you might have on Slack. Again, don't nickel and dime me about 1 or 2 points. That's not going to change your grade, as you could imagine. But if there's major things wrong, let's talk about them. Okay, today we are talking about end-user programming. Who can tell me what is end-user programming? Can anybody in the chat? There's 28 of you on the stream right now. Who in the chat can tell me what is end-user programming? Let me know. End-user programming, what it is. Take a guess if you don't know. Hello, hello. Hello. End-user programming. Can anybody tell me what end-user programming is? Ooh, we're getting close. Letting the user change settings of the app through programming. Yeah, more or less. Configuring your program so that it, does something for you as an end user. It's basically viewing the end user as a kind of a coworker, a programmer of the system. You allow them to do some configuration or some actual programming that affects how the system runs. So you do this all the time with spreadsheets. Excel is now, a Turing complete programming language. You can do anything in Excel that you could do with a general purpose language. Of course, it'd be way harder in some cases. But the idea is that when you use Excel, you are kind of co-programming along with the people that wrote Excel. You're making that spreadsheet do something, and it is actually kind of very similar to programming. So end-user programming is a very specific type of user experience, and so it's kind of worth talking about for a few minutes. We're not going to spend a whole class. We're only going to spend about half a class on it. But you need to know, here's what you need to know. You need to know the types of end-user programming. So when you are kind of faced with it, then you know how to deal with it in a way that doesn't suck, basically. Because what happens a lot of times is people are faced with end-user programming as a user experience problem, and it's not their whole app, it's just a small part of their app, and they don't know anything about end-user programming, and they do a horrible job because they reinvent things that already exist. So let's talk about the different types of end-user programming. There are several different types. They are usually visual languages. They are often called visual languages, but they can also be low code or no code. There's this whole new movement, low code and no code programming. These are all kind of the same kind of things. Visual languages or low code, no code, all the same type of thing. They allow end users to program the system. Now, one of the most old school ways of programming visually was using kind of control flow languages. And this is where each of these circles would be kind of like a statement in a traditional programming language. So for instance, this would be an if statement. If this, then go to this branch and do this thing and then finish. And if it's false, then go to this branch and finish. And this allows the kind of more casual user to understand how the language flows. And for instance, I believe these would be like loops where you're going through the loop again and again until some kind of condition is met, and then you get out of the loop. This is not very popular, so we're not actually going to look at any concrete examples of it. I just want you to know that it does exist as a way of programming. Control flow languages do exist, and if you have, you may consider this, although I personally don't recommend this one. Now, much more prevalent is what I'm calling data flow languages. And these are languages like this one, which is called Node-RED, where you have nodes like this, which is just listening to Twitter feed for something. And out of that, it flows the text and the details of the tweet. And then you can hook that up to other things to process it. So for instance, you could listen to the Twitter feed. That information flows to another node, which configures it. And then eventually it flows to here and tweets something related to that original tweet. The point here of these languages is that information is flowing across the nodes from left to right. Another version of this is LabVIEW. Has anybody ever heard of LabVIEW programming? LabVIEW? Let me know in the chat. Have you ever heard of LabVIEW? So for those of you that have ever programmed in Lego Mindstorms, you have actually used LabVIEW. So let me find a picture of it real quick. It looks like this. Yeah, here we go. This is what it looks like. And the information kind of flows through it. This is a loop, flows from here to here. And this is a little bit of a mix of data flow and control flow stuff, but more or less this is data flow. And so if you've ever used LabVIEW, that's more of like a data flow language. This one right here is called Node-RED. That's also definitely a data flow language. Let's take a quick look at a video about Node-RED. This is just a 1-minute video just to give you a sense of what this looks like when you're actually editing it.
Node-RED is a flow-based programming tool that makes it easy to create event-driven applications in a simple and intuitive way. It's built on top of Node.js and provides a browser-based editor for wiring flows together. It can run on devices such as the Raspberry Pi or in cloud environments, making it a very versatile tool. Its low-code visual approach to programming makes it ideal for a wide range of users. It hides all of the boilerplate code you don't need to worry about and lets you focus on solving the task at hand. It has been used in scenarios spanning a wide range of industries from manufacturing and utilities, healthcare and agriculture, home and industrial automation. The scope for what can be easily created with Node-RED is endless. This video series introduces the Node-RED editor and shows you how to make the most of what it can offer. It should be useful to new users of Node-RED as well as those who have been using it for a while. Let's get started.
All right, and again, this is just showing you the very basics of Node-RED. I wanted you to just see how it's edited, right? Like there's nodes, you drag connections between nodes. Like this is some kind of sensor that puts out x-axis and y-axis information, and then you can send that to other places. The information flows basically from left to right. Each of these boxes kind of does something, and you're mainly configuring these boxes instead of programming them, but you can also program them. So we're kind of hiding the complexity of programming by just having boxes and connections between them. All right, the things that I want you to, all right, let's go back real quick. Control flow, again, I don't recommend, but I just wanted you to know about it. Data flow is good for when you're processing a lot of data and you want to have a simple way of editing it, that end users can understand. It's good for filtering type tasks. It's good for processing large amounts of data. Those are the kinds of things I would use it for. The next one, which people have started to bring up, are block-based programming, and that is much like, I don't have the editor up, but Scratch, which I think most of you have seen, but let's just take a quick look. Block-based programming is characterized by this. I'm going to close that. You basically have these blocks. Let's say when the flag is clicked, you move 10 steps. You can turn 15 degrees. You could move 10 steps again, turn 15 degrees, and so on. And then when you press the flag, you'll see the cat starts to do that thing. Most people, I think, in this class have heard of Scratch or seen Scratch. What do you think the advantages of Scratch are? Can anybody tell me, what are the advantages of Scratch when you're getting end users to do it? Let me know in the chat. What are the advantages of Scratch? Not having to worry about syntax. That's very good point. Very simple and intuitive because you can kind of just read it and it makes sense. You learn some of the basic principles of code like ordering, but you can basically just read it and it tells you what's going to happen. Yeah, it definitely prevents syntax faults. That's great. And it allows kind of beginners to get in there. All right, great. So that's what Scratch is. And we just looked at that. And finally, spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are, in fact, an end user programming because you can, within any of these cells, you can basically put formulas, and then moving from this to this to this to this, you can depend, one cell can depend on the last cell, and that cell can depend on the previous cell, and you can make very sophisticated programs in the context of spreadsheets. This one is actually a product plan issues spreadsheet that somebody has made, and it is absolutely a program. I mean, people have programs to track issues of products, but in this case, they've actually programmed a spreadsheet to do it. You probably didn't know this, but again, spreadsheets are considered an end-user programming language because they're so configurable. You can put what are essentially little programs in each of these cells and have them depend on each other, and that's what makes them a program. All right, so we've talked about, we've talked about data flow programs, good for processing data. We have talked about Scratch-based program. These are good for, times when you need people to do basic things. The if and else and stuff like that is maybe a little complicated, but if you use the basic things like I had just showed you, where you just use basic blocks, it's good for end users because they can simply just tell a story and they understand how to tell a story. They understand that the things at the top happen first, the things at the bottom happen second. So any kind of story-based programming that you have, this is very good for. And spreadsheets are really good also for data processing and kind of stepwise data processing. So they're also a good option for data processing kinds of things. And there's a final one, which is kind of ad hoc configuration. And this is where it's not really a programming language, it's just configuring. And that is something like this, the if this then that, things like tell Alexa to find your phone. So in this case, this trigger, you just tell Alexa, you say, find my phone, and then she calls my phone, and it was all set up by doing some very simple configuration. I think it was done here in settings. It was like if this, and I had to say a specific phrase, which was call my phone. Again, that's just like kind of editing, like configuration. And then it would call my phone. I had to just configure the system to do that. So that's what I would call ad hoc configuration. It's not really programming, but it does in the end actually program the system. All right, get in there to minty.com. We're gonna have a quiz on end-user programming, because one of the most important things about end-user programming is how do you use these things and when do you use these things. So there is 34 of you right here in the feed right now. Get in there to the quiz. This quiz is going to help you understand how and when, most importantly, when do you use these different types of languages. This is part of a whole movement called the low-code movement. This is happening more and more with end users, so this is something that you almost certainly face in your career. All right, we're going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2, and let's go. Nope, I forgot to hit that. There we go. Answer fast to get more points, of course. To automate an employee bonus sharing system. How would you do that? Automating an employee bonus sharing system. Would you use a block-based solution, a data flow solution, a control flow solution, or a spreadsheet solution? And that's right, I would recommend a spreadsheet solution. This one's kind of just common sense when you're dealing with money and things like that. That is probably going to be happening in a spreadsheet. So spreadsheets are great for money or keeping track of numbers, things like that. All right, next up, question 2 of 4. To collect a bunch of tweets for later analysis. How might you do that? These tweets are kind of firing off randomly, and you want to take them in and maybe filter for just some certain ones and then put them in a file somewhere. How would you do that? What would be a good way to do that? And that's right, I would recommend data flow. And the point of that is, the reason that works well is because the data flow language there, it handles all the asynchronous of like, all these tweets are coming in, they're coming in, they're coming in. You don't have to write a special listener. It processes them when they show up, and then it feeds them through the pipeline, the data flow pipeline that you can see, and then puts them in the file at the end. So it's good for asynchronous kind of things. That's kind of the difference between data flow and spreadsheet, right? Spreadsheet is like you have all the stuff, you want to analyze it, you want to count the things, you want to make money decisions. Whereas data flow is like you're collecting the things, you're filtering them, and then you want to have some file output at the end. Question 3 of 4. Answer fast to get more points. To program a robot to do a simple task like pick up a block and put it somewhere, what do you think you might use? Block-based programming, data flow programming, control flow programming, or spreadsheet? And actually, so this was a good one. Those of you that said control flow, I understand why you said that, but think about it. When you're programming a robot, it's kind of like telling a story. Like the robot goes over here, it puts its arm down, it picks this block up, it moves over to the right, it puts its arm down, I was talking about programming. I should have specified a one-armed industrial robot. What a robot does is kind of like telling a story, and so that's why block-based programming is appropriate. Block-based programming is great for things like telling stories. Question 4 of 4. To turn on your lights when you leave home, what would you use then? To turn on your lights when you leave home, what would you use then? Would you use a block-based program, a data flow program, a control flow program, a spreadsheet program, or configuration? What do you think? All right, well, this one you could have said I would have also accepted block-based programming. Configuration is what is used in if this then that programming scenario that we just looked at, but you could have also used block-based programming, and yeah, so either would have worked there. And it looks like Hart is our winner, followed by Miles, Cole, Jackson, something I can't read, Shavid, Deppard, Oscar, Knife, Tyler, and me. Way to go, guys and gals. Excellent work. Okay, so that was end user programming. I just wanted to give you an intro to the different types of programming, because you are going to be certainly faced with end user programming at some point, and you're going to need to decide, do I use blocks? Do I use data flow? Do I use configuration? Another one that we didn't go into because it's not really formalized yet, there's a lot of like query builder type software. So if you have a complicated query to build, there is some visualizations that help you build a query, but those really aren't standardized yet, so they haven't, but they probably will be in the next, let's say, 5 years. So just be on the lookout for that kind of stuff. All right, next we are going to talk about fonts. And fonts, as we saw in the American Psycho clip the other day, they can seem like very unimportant choices, but they actually have a lot to do with how the user interprets things and how they how they interact with your software, with the feeling that they get when they look at it. So these are a lot more important than you think, and so there's something we're going to spend, again, a half a class on, and this is something that you're going to need to turn in at the end of this week. You're going to need to make decisions on your own fonts and your apps and turn in updated app. Okay, so let's take a quick look at this video. It's just a 3-minute video. We're starting a couple seconds in, and it's just going to give us a quick overview of some of the font characteristics.
Fonts or typefaces can be placed into 4 groups essentially. You have serifs, and these fonts have a little stroke at the end of the lettering, or as some people would say, feet. These generally look more formal and serious. The opposite to these fonts, you have sans serif fonts, so think of Helvetica Impact for example. These fonts look more modern than sans serif fonts. The third group is script fonts, which are cursive or hand lettering in style. I personally love utilizing these fonts in my graphic designs. The last group is decorative fonts. These break the boundaries of normality and are often attention-seeking fonts. It is true that the choice of font or typeface can truly make or break your design, and this is because fonts say a lot more than the actual words that they make up. They can evoke certain emotions and connotations, sometimes subconsciously and sometimes on a conscious level. This is why it is important to choose the right ones for your designs. The key to understanding what font to choose for your design is to understand what message your design is trying to convey. The aesthetic of the font or typeface should match the mood or feel of your design. So if it is a playful design for a kid's birthday party, for example, the font choice should not be serious. Serif font would look out of place here. You also want to draw attention and make it loud by using uppercase too. Another example would be if you were designing a business card for a lawyer. You may want to have their name in serif, so it comes across as more formal and professional. Using Comic Sans would not work here, but then again, show me a place Comic Sans is relevant. Don't overrun your graphic design with too many fonts. This confuses the style and the message of the design, and will come across as visually unappealing. So to summarize, think first about the message for your graphic design and what it's trying to get across. Is it serious and formal? Is it cute and playful? It might be articulate and sophisticated, or is it loud and important? Take all of this into account and then choose your font or typeface accordingly. Try out various different options to see what works. You can almost think of your font choice similar to a color choice as part of your design. Color also evokes strong, specific emotions depending on the choice, and so do fonts and typefaces. I hope you enjoyed this quick rundown.
All right, so that's just a little overview of fonts. Now, to see if you were paying attention, I want you to tell me, for your Putt app, do you think you should use serif or sans serif fonts? Let me know, should you use serif or sans serif fonts for your Putt app, and why? Let me know in the chat, should you use serif or sans serif fonts? Let me know which one you think you should use and why. In the chat, in the chat. And I see some answers coming in, but if you could tell me even your reasoning for using, for instance, sans serif or serif. So, because serif is too formal looking, that is definitely what I was looking for. Sans serif is more friendly, also a great answer. And somebody's mentioning mostly sans serif for readability on small screens, plus less serious. I definitely agree with the less serious. I wonder though about readability, because I have heard that serif actually does offer good readability at certain sizes. So let's talk about this more, or let's talk about fonts more, really. Good answers, thank you. So the thing about fonts is they are way more complicated than me or you think, and than we ever kind of want to care about, right? Like, there are many different types of measures of fonts, such as the X height, the bold size, the stem size. This is an ascender, which means it goes above the X height, for instance. This is an aperture. This is a special measure called an M width, an N width, which are, kind of different characters. This is a descender, which drops below. And of course, we just talked about serifs versus sans serifs. There is actually a descent measure, which means like how far things are going to hang below the line. And there is, of course, the baseline and the top line. So there are many different measures that you have to think about when you're designing a font. We're not designing fonts, but you do need to think about things like, how high, how low it goes, how far it descends, and how high it ascends when you're thinking about spacing. And you need to think about things like width, because you need to see how like spread out or compressed you want your words to look like. Not that you need to design them, but you need to be aware that different fonts have different measures for these things. Another thing that, again, you won't consider until you're really trying to choose a font very carefully is things like kerning. So you'll notice in the top here that if we just, space things equally, like, hey, we space this, from the edge here to the edge is always consistent, like we've done at the top. This VO looks pretty weird. But if we realize that this V, it kind of hangs over at the top, and we put a smaller space here called the kerning, that's a whole nother consideration, again, for fonts that I personally had never thought about before doing this lecture on fonts. Again, just the details that separate good fonts from bad fonts, and the fact that this one has this kerning, which makes the spacing here look a lot more natural. So it's a lot more similar to how people would do it. This is how computers might do it if you did it kind of for the first time. Now, some of the choices you're going to have to make are, of course, serif versus sans serif. But there's another choice, and it is, monospace versus not monospace. Who can tell me what a monospace font is? What is a monospace font? Who can tell me what is a monospace font? Tell me in the chat. What do you think a monospace font is? Anybody got a guess? That is in the right direction for sure. Think about, what do you think a monospace? So a monospace font is a font where each letter has equal spacing. So why would you ever want a font where all characters, as Jared is saying, all characters are the same width? Why would you ever want a font where all characters are the same width? I'm seeing some good answers, for instance, from Ashley, that IDEs are often using monospace fonts. Why would IDEs want to use monospace fonts? Or who else would want to use monospace fonts? Why would you ever want to use them? They seem like they would be kind of weird. People are saying they're good to program with. That is absolutely a great place to use them because you'll often want your characters to line up. So monospace fonts are used in very particular situations. Honestly, the only one I can think of right now is in programming, because you'll want, your characters to take up kind of the same amount of space when you're programming, because you'll want things to line up, like when you tab in and stuff like that. They're good for lining up. They're good for kind of counting how many characters you have in, let's say, strings that you're going to output to the string. They are good for readability, because if you have everything like lined up vertically, you know that that's the same amount of spaces or tabs. So anyway, they are good for that. They came, of course, like people are saying, they came from typewriters, because that's how early typewriters used to use. But it is important, very important difference to know that monospace exists, and that is really mainly used for things like code, or whenever it's really important to line things up. If you're trying to line things up for some reason in a graphic design, you're going to want to find a monospace font. Okay, so that's an important difference. Now, but let's look at, so I have this link right here in the, what do you call it? In the presentation. I'll put it in the chat too, because I really like this. When you're thinking about what font you might want to use, especially for your project, it's kind of nice to have this, what do you call it, this resource, because it walks you through some choices and how they affect what your fonts look like. For instance, in the serif style, there's kind of like old style, transitional, and modern. So even within serif, there can be a fairly big range of what fonts look like. So if you want to be formal but modern, you want to choose a font that looks a lot more like this, where has very skinny serifs. Where if you want to have a kind of traditional or old style, you'll have these kind of more calligraphy-like serifs, as you can see down here. And if you're transitional, you're somewhere in between. Maybe your serifs are a little more straight and a little more skinny, but nowhere near the extreme skinniness that we have for modern. So even within serifs, there's a wide variation. And there are, of course, other ones, but I'm only wanted to look at these three. Then, if you go to sans serif, there's a huge amount of variation here. I'm not going to kind of go through all these, but this is kind of more like a normal sans serif that you're going to see. And then there's also things like script, which I would recommend using with not very often, and mainly in in a place where you're really trying to send a very clear, like a very like an invitation kind of thing. These are good for invitations. They're not good for regular apps usually, but these are some scripts. And monospaced, which is having the same amount of space between and also taking up the same amount of space. And display, which reminds us of things that are more custom, right? Like on top of all of these fonts, we can also have fonts that are like completely custom, like made out of little blocks of wood or out of Legos or whatever. And those are going to give us a very custom but very extreme look. So this is a great resource. I wanted to just put it out here to get you thinking about the different kind of families of fonts, and helping you choose. Like, these can help you make some good decisions, I think, for your apps. Okay, enough about that. You have the link right there in the chat. Now, on top of what we've talked about, like the type of font that you've chosen, it turns out that italics, like the style of the font, can make a big difference on top of that. There is, of course, you can make things italic, you can make things bold. Who else can tell me a style that is actually used quite often? So these are styles we're looking at now. Italics, bold. What other styles are there? Let me know what other things you consider to be styles. Let me know in the chat, of course. Strike through. That's one of my favorite styles. Strike through is a great style. Underlined is another more popular one, but I don't like to use that. The slash through one is a great one to use. Again, underlined is one. You're absolutely right, but I would use that with caution because that's kind of with the hyperlink back in the day, that was a little bit overused. So italics, bold, strike through, underline, superscript, subscript, highlighted. Yeah, that's kind of a style, I would say. Yeah. So these things can apply, of course, to all the different fonts. It's just another dimension of fonts for you to consider, because things like italics, bold, and strike through, and even underline, have a major effect on that font. The bolded versus not bolded version of it is a whole different effect. So you just want to know, you choose the font, but then you also choose italics or not italics or bold or not bold, and that is also should be an intentional choice on top of already being intentional about the font. So we want to talk about how do you use fonts in your, within your project. Do you just make everything a different font? No. As we saw in the video, there is a strict upper limit to the number of fonts that you should use in any app or in any invitation or any document, really. And that should be 3 to 4 different types total. Now, a type of font is really defined by all of these things: typeface, the size, and the style. So that means if you have a bold version of a font and a non-bold version of the font, that makes 2 types. You only have 2 more at most to include in your app. If your app has 6 or even 8 different types of font, it's going to look crazy. It's going to look schizophrenic. You can't do that. You only need 3 or 4 at most. Some other quick and dirty rules for choosing fonts, and as you get your app, you're gonna have to make these kind of choices. So 2 to 4 at most. Contrast is good. So if you have like a sans serif as the title, a serif in the body can actually be a good choice because it's contrast. Or of course, if you have a bold in the title, then a non-bold in the body, that can be great because it's a contrast. Often you're going to want to use one serif and one sans serif. Sans serif in the serif in the body is actually supposed to be better for readability. So there's been studies that using serifs in the body and the smaller text is better for readability. Although, of course, there's always studies that show different things. But that is something that has been studied recently and has been shown to help. Now, one thing I want to mention is you're going to have 2 to 4 different types. If you have 2 of your types that are really similar, nobody's going to notice that they're actually different. And they're just going to be kind of weirdly different, like just barely different. And it's going to give the user a eerie feeling. Like I know these are different for some reason, but I can't pinpoint it. And I'm not really thinking about your fonts too hard. So it's just going to bother me in the back of my mind. So you want to have fonts, if you choose to change a font, you want it to be significantly different than anything else that is already there. Otherwise, just use what's already there. If you have 2 things that are too similar, it's a real problem. Okay, really quick, what I want you to do is go to this link, and I want you to style it, download this text. I'm putting the link in the chat. Download this text, and like you can use a Word document. You know, here is the text. Just copy all the text here, just the text, and style it, and upload it to this folder, which I will also put in the chat. I'm going to give you all just a few minutes. The only thing that you're going to be able to change is style of the font. Remember, style is typeface, style itself, and shoot, what did I say that was just a second ago? Typeface, style, and size. That's what you're going to be changing. So go to that link, download the text. You're going to use that text, put it in a Word doc or something, and then you're going to style it using fonts, okay? And you're going to upload it to this link, and then we're going to take a look at these in just a minute, okay? So I'm going to give you all just about a song or two's worth time to do this. Get out there, choose your fonts, see how much font matters, and go ahead and go. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions.
Hey, y'all ain't get to see what I foresaw coming. Not a team overseas, I'm Warsaw stunning. Talk tough to me, catch a North Paw from it. It's fat, let me pull the booty shorts off of it one time. She gon' get divorced off of it, cause she in the crowd screaming, getting hoarse off of it. 2 girlfriends, them of course y'all cousins. It's a Lambo, watch me pull the doors off of it. It's MTV, jam of the week. And that's why she dancing with me. And that's why she dancing with me. And that's why she dancing with me. Oh yeah, it's a jam of the week. And that's why she dancing with me. Drop down, go and put your hands on your knees. I just want the free trial, I'ma cancel the fees. Oh yeah. I don't want it with the strings attached. I just wanna see you drop back like a first string quarterback. Off the pack contact. She slid through. We can smoke some, then sip juice. 2 keys to the 10 roof. I got something that I got it to, but in the meantime, clouds, we going in. Look down, she go again. Can you look out for my best friend and bring another pretty girl in with you? Y'all ain't get to see what I foresaw coming. Not a team overseas, I'm Warsaw stunning. Talk tough to me, catch a North Paw from it. It's fat, let me pull the booty shorts off of it one time. She gon' get divorced off of it, cause she in the crowd screaming, getting hoarse off of it. 2 girlfriends, them of course y'all cousins. It's a Lambo, watch me pull the doors off of it. It's MTV, jam of the week. And that's why she dancing with me. And that's why she dancing with me. And that's why she dancing with me. Oh yeah, it's a jam of the week. And that's why she dancing with me. Drop down, go and put your hands on your knees. I just want the free trial, I'ma cancel the fees. Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the studio into the night show. She gon' treat me like it's a tightrope. Wrap it up, tightrope. Ask me if I'm coming, hell if I know. Feisty. She gon' throw it on the white tee. She sucking pages round on icy. Ask me if I fed it to the them I might be. She wanna see just what the hype be. Leveled up, fill my cup, to listen up. Double stuff, I'm 2 rounds in the guts. She know how I'm coming. Bigly up on what's all stunning.
Y'all ain't get to see what I foresaw coming. Not a team overseas, I'm Warsaw stunning. Talk tough to me, catch a North Paw from it. It's fat, let me pull the booty shorts off of it one time. She gon' get divorced off of it, cause she in the crowd screaming, getting hoarse off of it. 2 girlfriends, then of course y'all cousins. It's a Lambo, watch me pull the doors off of it. MTV, jam of the week. And that's why she dancing with me. And that's why she dancing with me. And that's why she dancing with me. Oh yeah, it's a jam of the week. And that's why she dancing with me. Drop down, go and put your hands on your knees. I just want the free trial, I'ma cancel the fees. Oh yeah.
All right, have y'all had enough time, or do you need one more minute? Had enough time, or you need one more minute? Let me know in the chat. Have you had enough time, or do you need one more minute? Let me know in the chat. Hello, hello. There's 39 of you right here on the stream. One of you stop. Yep, all right, great. One more minute. I'll give y'all just a half a song more. One more minute, and then we're going to look at them.
I know you tried crying, it didn't help nothing. Funny how the time flies. Middle school classmates in the crime times. These some trying times. My girl, summertime fine, wintertime cold too. Everybody won't accept nothing but the old you. Giving you advice like I'm not gonna hold you. I wish you had, cause you don't know what I go through. They don't know what you go through. You keep it on the low too. They tell me that they feel me, they tell me that it's soulful. Type of shit that make the people tell you that it's so true. Right after you say it, cause they just feel like they know you. They just feel like they know you, but they don't know you. But they don't know you. But they don't. I know you tried crying, it didn't help nothing. Funny how the time flies. Middle school classmates in the crime times. These some trying times.
All right, 30 more seconds, 30 more seconds.
Everybody won't accept nothing but the old you. Giving you advice like I'm not gonna hold you. I wish you had, cause you don't know what I go through. You don't know what I... It didn't help nothing. Funny how the time flies. Middle school classmates in the crime times. These some trying times.
All right, we're gonna look at them real quick. Get them uploaded if you haven't already. FYI, I did look up again, and my sources say that that serif is actually easier to read. Serif is actually easier to read. And I'm going to give y'all just another second to upload, and we're going to look at a few of these. So if you want your stuff to be easier to read, serif is actually easier to read, and that's why I recommend using it in the bodies. All right, let's take a look here. What we're doing here is we're looking at variation across. You know, everybody had the same text. Here we have bold for the main title, non-bold, smaller for this kind of second title, and then smaller, non-bold for the body. I'm not going to make any comments on it yet, but notice that the only comment I am going to make is there's no serifs here, no serifs. So check it out. That's what is up with this one. Check it out. Here we have a bold kind of display, larger main title, a bold, more normal sans serif here, and then a non-bold sans serif in the bottom. Again, no serifs at all. Actually, no serifs here. There are serifs in the title. So there is some contrast here. All right, here we have bold, bigger sans serif, just italic sans serif, and regular sans serif. Interesting use of italics. I like it. All right, here we have somebody that went for it, and you can see that we have a serif title, a Comic Sans or handwriting kind of whatever mid-title, and then a serif body. Personally, I really like the serif body, and I really like the kind of going for it in the title there. That really makes a statement. This one here in the middle, I'm not sure of because it's a little extreme. It's like maybe a little too much. Maybe this one could have been just a little bit more chill. But however, this is at least interesting. Some of these, to me, especially like this one, it's not so interesting, right? This one's a little more interesting. This one's not interesting. Oh, this one has some character to it, okay? So your fonts can give things some character. Here is another one. The main title and the subtitle are very similar. And then we have serifs in the body. And in my opinion, this is easier to read in the body. And these are good for titles. However, notice that the main title and the subtitle are very, very similar. They look like they only change in size. Whenever you have things that don't contrast enough, then that looks a little weird, right? Though to me that looks weird. It looks like, oh, I guess that's a smaller size on the second one, but I would have preferred more contrast between the top title and the middle title there. So that's what we mean by having contrast. Great contrast between these two and the body, though. All right, I'm going to skip this one because I'm not a big fan. I'm going to skip through a couple of them. And let me refresh one time in case some of y'all just got it in. And let's go down to the bottom because this also has some from last year's class. All right, cool. Look at this one. I like this one because it's 3 distinct things. All of these types are different. All of these types are different. I worry that the bottom one is a little too big for the body compared to the others, but I like it that they're all different. This is really interesting because they use font to give you like a really old school kind of vibe. That is interesting. This one's funny because it doesn't make sense. And all right, we're back to the other ones. Now, there might be 1 or 2 others from last year I'll show you. Let's see. All right, I don't think we're going to learn anything additional from those. I'm going to go ahead and say that is the end of class for today. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them up here on Menti. Otherwise, that is the end of class for today. Hope you all have a great day. Thanks for coming. I will see y'all on Wednesday. Put your questions up here on Menti if you have any. Otherwise, see you on Wednesday. Somebody's asking in the... All right, so somebody's asking, will we still have class on Wednesday because they're saying it's reading day? I'm not sure it is. Let me double check. Calendar. I'm just double checking the spring calendar and... cool. All right, so Wednesday is a reading day. There will be no class on Wednesday. No class on Wednesday because it is a reading day. Wednesday is a reading day. There will be no class. Thank you for pointing that out. Excellent question. Somebody's saying, would it be possible to make this project due on Sunday to give people a little more time? Hold on a sec. I can see, when is that due date? All right, it is now due on Sunday. I have updated it to be due on Sunday. Happy birthday. There you go. You do not need to turn anything in on Gradescope today. Nope, you do not. Do not need to turn anything in on Gradescope today. And somebody's asking this isn't a question. Class participation is 40%. You are right. Correct. Somebody's saying class participation is 40%. I missed 2 reading days because I had things going on. Wondering how many more. There will definitely be more participation grades. We we do those almost every Friday, get new participation grades. If you miss 2, you're fine, because we dropped the 2 lowest participation grades. So yeah, if you miss 2, you're fine. If you miss more than that, that's when it will be a problem. So just come to all the rest of them and you will be totally fine. All right, I don't see any more questions on Minty, so I will see y'all later. Have a great day.